It's time to catch the brass ring, the show featuring ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You really can turn possibility into reality, and the time to do it is right now. Welcome to the Brass Ring. I'm Gina Gioldi, and today we're going to be talking with three people who each have a very unique story to tell. All their journeys have been different, but every one of them has caught their own brass ring.
Nicole Witt faced a challenge that many women face, infertility. But what makes Nicole unique is that her battle not only brought a bundle of joy, it also brought her a new career. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Gina.
All right, so tell us your story.
Well, in a nutshell, my husband and I went through a few years of suffering through more and more invasive infertility treatments, and fortunately for us, they were ultimately successful. We actually ended up with two bundles of joy, about a year and a half apart, a boy and a girl. And, you know, at that point, I was working in corporate America, and you know, I was very successful in my position, but it wasn't something that was emotionally satisfying for me. And I just felt like, how can I go back to work? I've worked so hard to have these beautiful children. I want to spend time with them. I want to have flexibility. I don't want to be away 14 hours a day just for a paycheck, you know, at an unsatisfying job. So I took a leap and I started the adoption consultancy, which helps other infertile people to adopt and to build their families.
Well, you know, when I read the information about your organization, the first thing I thought of is she's like the wedding planner for adoptions.
Exactly. And I often use that phrase to describe what I do because it helps people to sort of get it quickly. And I guide people step by step through what's otherwise an overwhelming process.
Now, I have a question where you personally went through the infertility treatments, and I want to talk about that for a few minutes and how the emotional upheaval of that and how to keep yourself feeling whole during that process. But why did you decide to set up a business that dealt with adoption as opposed to infertility?
Well, it's interesting because when my husband and I were going through the process, we never really considered adoption as a viable option for us. And it was because we believed a lot of the myths that are out there about adoption. We believed that it takes years to adopt a healthy newborn. We believed that birth parents can come back and take their child back. We believed that children of, you know, the race that we were looking for, which in our case would have been a Caucasian baby, you know, would not be available for adoption. And during the course of our infertility journey and getting very involved with Resolve, the National Infertility Support Group, and just, you know, meeting people and learning things about it, I discovered that all these beliefs we had about adoption were completely untrue, and that it really is an incredible adoption for people, or incredible option for people. And I just felt that, you know, wow, people really need to know that. And as they're struggling through this process and trying to make the decisions, you know, that are going to lead them down the path that's right for them, they need to have the information so that they can make an intelligent, informed decision. And I just felt really called to sharing that information that I didn't have.
You know, everything you said, I personally have not had experience with the adoption process. I know people who have, and everything you said, all those misperceptions, those are what I think. Those are what I believe, and so you're right. I think as the general public, we do think it's almost impossible. We hear stories about, you know, having a baby coming from another country and it being tied up in red tape for years. Mm-hmm. And all of these things. And I was very surprised to hear you say that it really can happen in a short period of time.
Yeah, it can. Most of our clients adopt within the U.S., not internationally. But our average time frame is about 6 months. You know, we take a different approach. We take a very proactive approach to it. But, you know, we have great success with that. I was just working with a couple, Annette and Travis from Nebraska, and they had been with their local agency waiting for about 2 years, and they had nothing going on. I don't even think they were ever even presented to a birth mom. And they got tired of just sitting around doing that. They decided they wanted to be more proactive. So we started working together. I got their scrapbook updated. I got them, visibility with a lot of different agencies and attorneys, and they matched with a birth mom in about 6 weeks. And she gave birth about a month later, and they adopted their son. So sometimes it just takes approaching it differently than what the conventional wisdom says is the way to approach it.
What's interesting is obviously your prior career as a brand manager in strategic marketing for a large consumer package group came in very handy, because what you just explained and described was repackaging the family.
Right? Yeah, I know it sounds a little crass to put some of these things in business terms, but, there is a lot of it. There is a lot of strategy. There is a lot of marketing. Ultimately, there has to be an emotional connection. It has to be the right birth mom for the right family. But to get to that point where you even have that opportunity, you do have to think about it very strategically up front.
Let's go back to when you yourself were going through the infertility treatments and you and your husband were facing that. How did you stay whole emotionally? How did you do that while still working and keeping your relationship intact? Because I can only imagine the stress.
It's a tremendous amount of stress, and in fact, studies show that women going through infertility have the same depression levels as women battling terminal illness.
Wow.
And it's it affects every aspect of your life, from, like you were saying, your marriage to your family relationships to your job. I mean, how do you explain why you have a doctor's appointment every single morning, without sharing a lot of personal information that you don't want to share? So it's completely pervasive throughout your whole life, and it's really tough to handle. For my husband and I, our salvation was finding the right support group for ourselves. We actually had two, and we had tried several till we found just the right one. One was sort of a larger general infertility support group where we got a lot of, kind of general information, but we also ultimately had to find a support group with a small group of people that was facing more specifically the same condition and the same choices and so on that we were facing. And by having that small group of about I think it was about 6 couples and a therapist that was leading the group really helped us through. I mean, a few of them are very close friends still today, almost 10 years later. And just having that support and being able to talk through the things and communicating was absolutely critical, because infertility does, drive a lot of people apart, and it's a shame. But I think the couples that make it through end up in a stronger place than before they started, because of how open they need to be with each other and how much they need to learn to communicate effectively.
I can only imagine. I'm guessing, too, even once one becomes pregnant and it's a viable pregnancy, the stress involved in waiting for the other shoe to drop, hoping everything goes okay, that must be even tougher, I think.
You're absolutely right, and you're very insightful on that. Most people don't appreciate that. But ultimately, if you do get pregnant, you never get to enjoy that pregnancy the same way that somebody who hasn't been through the process does, because you're always terrified that something's going to go wrong.
And how do you deal as a couple with that? Because I'm guessing, now I could be wrong, but I'm guessing the woman's a little bit more apprehensive. She's the one who's, did I feel the baby kick? Is this? Is that? And so she is reminded 24/7.
Right.
Was your husband as much on the edge with it, worrying as you were, or was it a different experience because you were the woman?
I'm sure it was a different experience. I think he probably had the same level of concern, but he had it in his own way, right? As men and women sort of always do. And you're right, he didn't have kind of that 24/7 reminder. He didn't know how I was feeling each day. My husband is just wonderful and is incredibly supportive and very attuned to everything that we were going through. So I consider myself very fortunate in that manner. I mean, he came to every single doctor's appointment with me, just was completely involved. But you're right. I think that generally speaking, especially once you get through that first trimester, the conventional wisdom is, okay, you can kind of relax now. And I think, the men probably do a little bit. But
right.
You're right, with the women, with every little tinge, and what's that, and what does that mean, and is that okay, and am I supposed to feel this way? It's really scary. I don't think people really relax and enjoy it at all until, maybe the last month or so when they know that the baby's viable.
Right. Well, I know that before I had my son many years ago, I had a miscarriage, and I didn't think it could happen. How could that happen? How could that be? It was never on the radar. And after it did, I was like, wait a minute. And I suddenly felt so vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly, and I was lucky. I got pregnant 4 or 5 weeks later. It was right away. But I remember I was walking on eggshells. And it was tough. But of course, the resulting, present that you get at the end, that bundle, or in your case, bundles of joy, right? Mm-hmm. That's certainly well worth all the effort and all the anxiety. That's what parents are for and moms are for. It's still that way, no matter.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And I would go through it all 10 times over again to get to be their mom. But, like we were saying up front, and I think from going through the process, and so many people who go through the infertility journey, whether or not they end up changing their career for it or not, end up finding some really surprising, wonderful, positive things along the way, whether it's, that their marriage is strengthened or they have new lifelong friends that understand them in a way that nobody else does, or, whether it's sort of extreme as how I totally changed my life and my career. But I think if people open their eyes and look for it, at the end, they find some really wonderful benefits that came out of such a difficult time.
Well, and for you, like you said, I think you're a bit unique. You did that whole career change. But obviously that was an evolution for you. And the question is, if you hadn't gone through infertility and you had no problem with having children initially, would you still be in the same position you were in? Would you still be at the same job? Would you be as happy as you are now?
Right. I think about that frequently, and I think I would be at the same type of job, and I think I'd probably be pretty miserable. And I know that I wouldn't be the kind of mom that I'm able to be now. I'm able to have flexibility and attend school functions and have breakfast and dinner with my kids every single day. And I just wouldn't have that. So, again, hindsight's 20/20 always, but I now feel so fortunate that we went through that, and it has brought my life to a place where I'm really happy and satisfied, and I just don't think I would be here otherwise.
No, it sounds like you wouldn't be, because it sounds like you'd be many of us. You just would kind of go along with what you were plugged into. Mm-hmm. And then once you become a parent, it's so hard, as it is, to juggle having a career, having kids, that a lot of times you don't stop and allow yourself the opportunity to say, okay, but even though I'm doing both these things, even though there's no time to fold the laundry, and that's happening at 2:30 in the morning, there are different things I may want to be doing. And I think it's so important for people out there who feel trapped, and particularly those who are juggling being parents, maybe being caregivers of their parents, right? Also juggling a career, to say, well, wait a minute, it seems like I have no time to do anything, but I have to step back and see, am I doing the right thing overall? And that means an evaluation, not of just, what's going on in the house, but certainly the whole career thing.
Absolutely. And I think we fall into that trap of just doing what you feel like you're supposed to do, what you've always been told that you're supposed to do. And sometimes it does take, an event that really shakes you to your core and that really makes you question anything to give you the courage to make that leap. And it shouldn't, it's a sort of a bit of a shame when it does. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important for people to stop and question themselves and what they've been told that they're always supposed to do, without maybe having to go through such a traumatic experience to get there.
And let's talk about for a minute your jumping off the cliff, deciding to start your own business, that whole piece of it. How did you make that transition? You had your mindset, you decided you were going to do it, but what are the things that you did initially to make that business roll? Because this was something brand new for you.
It was very brand new. Like we'd said with the marketing and the strategy background, I knew a lot of those skills would translate, but I'd never started my own business. I mean, a lot of it was very new. So I started with doing volunteer work in the area. So I actually went back to my regular job part-time after having my children, and then I somehow managed to squeeze in, doing volunteer work in the adoption world. So I did that for a couple of years and, just really learned about it, made the connections, learned what I needed to do. But then it got to a point where I knew, it was time to leap or to not leap. There was not going to be
right.
more, one toe at a time type of approach. So it actually sort of worked out well because my husband and I got an opportunity to relocate. That's when we relocated to Florida, which is where we really wanted to be. So we just said, well, this is it. This is the time. I could do a whole job search down there, or, I can just start the business as soon as we get there. So, like I said, I had done the volunteer work to learn it all. We'd been squirreling away as much money as we could to carry us for as long as we could until the business started
right.
sustaining itself and supporting us. And, we just made that leap at that point, and fortunately it's all worked out wonderfully.
Congratulations. So 3 bundles of joy, 2 children, a business. You're cooking. You're
right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Nicole, thanks so much. Let us know your website so that for people who are interested in learning more about your story, but also learning about the services, certainly, that you provide to people, wonderful services. Give us the website.
The website is theadoptionconsultancy.com. So THE Adoption Consultancy, CONSULTANCY.com.
Congratulations on all your successes, Nicole. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Gina.
Bye-bye.
Bye.